What's going on, you guys? My name's Tori Kravitz. Welcome to another episode of She's with the Band. I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Alicia Atout. And today we are so stoked to be joined by Emma of Dying Wish. How are you doing, Emma?
Great. How are y'all?
Dude, so
Great.
excited to be chatting with you. And we're all here together now to do some female empowerment and just talk about your career and all of the amazingness that you are. So
Thank
Alicia,
you.
want to jump right into the first one?
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to take things to the very beginning because I know that your love of hardcore and heavy music started roughly around the age of 16 when you were discovering acts like Foundation, which then led to soaking in all of those beautiful gothic elements of Typo Negative to admiring the lyricism of Hatebreed. Now, Dying Wish was also born earlier on in that sense as you and some of your bandmates went to metal shows together in middle school. So what so early on truly made you be attracted and compelled into that music scene of heavier music? And I'd love to just kind of get into that mind of a young music loving Emma.
Oh yeah. Well, um, it really started for me when we moved to Portland. I was 13 and we had moved around a lot when I was a kid. And so going to different schools and stuff, and eventually landed outside of Portland, where for the first time I had access to live music. And so being able to go to shows starting, when I was like 13, 14 years old, and, finally making a solid group of friends for like the first time in my life that was a place where I really felt like I belonged after, living in small towns and moving around quite a bit. And so it was really largely part of the community aspect for me. On top of, the love of music always had, always wanted to sing or be in a band. And so it kind of just made it all come together when I had the proper community to embrace it with.
I feel like it's so hard finding that community too when you're younger because you're in your mind thinking, oh my gosh, I love this music. Not everyone does enjoy this music. It's hard to find people on that same page, that same level. So the fact that you're able to find your community so early on when people now at our ages are still trying to find it is so lovely. Because I know Tori and I went through that same thing where we're like, man, why can't we find our people?
And that's
Hmm.
exactly why we've ended up on this podcast, isn't it?
Yeah, we finally found
Awesome.
them.
We found our
Love it.
people. Yeah, and very specifically, hardcore is a genre, a subgenre of rock that is known for being the tight-knit community, known for the DIY ethics. I mean, I've seen it firsthand at many an FYA fest and many a hardcore show. And just from that experience, I've also seen that, it is still pretty male-driven, although we're starting to see more ladies coming into the mix and getting down in the pits. So what has your experience been going from being a fan in the scene into becoming a front woman? And have you felt that you've been treated differently by your peers as you've kind of navigated those different roles?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I first started going to shows, there was probably only a handful of girls within the scene. And it just got to the point where I think a lot of us were just really tired of seeing men do everything. And, we were going to shows and shows were being booked, and it was just like it's just kind of like not really getting us anywhere. So like what would happen, if we kind of took over for a little bit? So I started booking shows. We had a collective call out within the community of sexual assault allegations and stuff like that. And so myself and other women and non-binary people got together and created kind of a collective of people within punk and hardcore scene, the hardcore scene. And we just kind of decided, this was in 2015 or 2016, that we really wanted to make a difference. And so we made consent, zines, and we did workshops at shows, and we tabled, and we made merch, and we did, collective outings where anyone was welcome. And we just wanted to kind of build the scene in a different way, highlighting women and femme and non-binary people's voices. And so I think that's kind of where and this was around the time where Gloss was coming out as well, which was a band full of trans women from Olympia. And so being in the Northwest, being exposed to that band coming up was kind of like this changing moment that I can pinpoint within the scene. We were always there, but we weren't as involved. And it was a really important moment for us. Like, okay, like, we can be as we can contribute just as much. And so I think from then I just started to not even think about it anymore, honestly. There will be moments where, people at venues will say stuff to me or whatever, but besides that, I don't really think about being treated differently. I just have kind of had this head on confidence about knowing that I belong here and knowing that the rest of us do too.
Yeah. Oh, it's so cool to hear that you've like taken something that could be negative, like, oh, it's male driven, and then being like, well, we're going to make our own community if it doesn't exist yet, and starting to create that camaraderie amongst like kind of the outcasts in a way. And, while that's so positive, it's like, Alicia and I were just talking before this interview about how certain festivals, it's like you still kind of have to brace yourself to get catcalled, or harassment still exists and things like that. So like, as much as we're trying to create this support for each other, even with this podcast of being able to uplift each other, we're still having to figure out ways to cope, or to like, how do we react properly to these kinds of things? So what would your advice be to, still feel strong and empowered while these things unfortunately still exist too?
To me, I would say that it's very normal for me to play music. It's very normal for me to be in this role. It's not normal to be on the other side of someone who's going to harass me or make it seem like it's not normal. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think normalization is a big thing. And I think that one thing, I'm so used to the reactions from men that it doesn't even really bother me anymore. It does, but I'm just like, okay, that's to be expected. I think the thing that really bothers me the most is that I get catcalled by women also. And it's like, I understand that like that is a form of empowerment, it's whatever, I guess, but it's just also like that. I don't know if you want to discuss that. I don't know if you have had anyone else talk about that on your show. But I feel like that's something that women in the scene need to unlearn too, is like, you don't have to be one of the boys in order to, you
Mm,
know, thrive in this scene. You don't have to act like that. You know what I mean? And I think it comes from a good place. I genuinely do. I don't like to call people out on stuff like that because I don't want to embarrass anybody. But that I think is what bothers me the most these days, is being catcalled by women, or when they say inappropriate things when I'm on stage. Um, that definitely gets to me the most, because I expect men to do those things a lot of the time, and I'm used to that, but I'm not so used to the other side of that coin.
Right.
mm.
You genuinely hope deep down that those were the people who were championing you and who wouldn't be doing it, and who would truly understand the points of, hey, this doesn't fly and this is why. So that's shocking to hear that that's actually something
Yeah.
you consistently go through.
I would say it happens a few times a tour. And
Wow.
I've seen other people talk about it too. And I love women. I don't want to embarrass them ever, but I think women are better than that. And I just think it's simply a conversation that we need to have about it. But um, yeah, like I said, I'm pretty desensitized to men doing it at this point. It just like makes me angry. And when women do it, it just like, it makes me sad. So
Yeah. I guess at the end of the day, like, being a woman in this kind of scene, we all get a little bit lost on what is the best way to be strong and be empowered. And so I guess having these conversations of what feels comfortable, what is actually empowering versus disempowering, and how can we make each other feel safe is, I guess, the first step to creating some change, which is why we're all here, isn't it?
Hopefully.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I wanted to kind of touching on that, is really how it's crazy to see how a journey can have so many highs and lows. Like, you really do go from having those super shitty interactions of sexism throughout your career to sometimes on the same day playing huge tours and having your happy cries after hometown shows. And we all kind of work so hard with every project that we touch, and it can be so difficult facing that unnecessary criticism as women. Music is a clear therapy for you, but we'd love to know, how else do you cope with those frustrations and the disappointment and sadness, or just life's frustrations in general, outside of turning to music?
I think I struggle with that, honestly. I I struggle with routine, and I think exercising is something that it's another outlet for me to um, really. I think a lot of it is to just pull myself out of the focus of being so involved in music, and it is like it in a way has become a part of my identity that I think could be really dangerous. Um, and so exercising is something, working out, lifting weights is something that is another coping mechanism for me. And besides that, like I really struggle with that. I'm in therapy right now and we're talking about coping, and um, I think it's a lot of it is what they call divergent thinking strategies, but writing is a big one for me too, journaling or um, I dream a lot, and I think that dreams are really important. I think that it's a subconscious message that you
Yes.
need to digest. And so I do dream analysis and dream journaling. And those are just the little things that kind of help me cope and kind of like reflect on everything, because when you're on tour everything happens so fast, it's almost impossible to process what's happening to you constantly, and so you have to like slow down quite a bit when you're on tour and also at home especially.
Yeah.
I appreciate you being so honest just in regards to like opening up in that sense. And I'm this on the same page. I find that my dreams are so bizarrely realistic that the moment I wake up, I have to put them onto paper just to analyze, hey, what am I trying to tell myself when I'm not completely there? So for you, have you kind of had one of those eye-opening dreams lately where you've walked away and thought, wow, okay, I can kind of get a better sense of myself now simply through the subconscious, which is a wild thing in itself.
Oh, definitely. I had this dream recently where I love to cook also. And so I was making this big breakfast. I'd spent all morning like prepping, and then something happened and I was making my food and I got distracted. So I went and did whatever, dealt with whatever was distracting me on the side. And I came back and all of my food was ruined. To me, what that means is that I've spent so much time and energy prepping for this moment in my career and the moment that is ahead of us. And I am afraid that I'm going to get distracted and then it's all going to fall apart or something. And so to me, that was like, okay, stay focused, um, keep a balance. And it was very eye opening for me to just wake up and know immediately, like, oh, that's what I think that means, because,
Mhm.
it's the subconscious part of your brain you don't really connect with until you are dreaming.
Hmm. Oh, that's amazing. And plus, like you were saying, being on tour is such a bubble. And so the fact that you have this, like, just you're so grounded and so mindful of yourself and like these kinds of things, like it's so refreshing to hear that you're really taking care of yourself and staying in tune with like what you're feeling within your career as well. It's
Yeah,
huge.
it's really difficult, but it's kind of one of those things where when you're on tour for like 3 months in a row, you can't ignore it at a certain point. It's like it's very much a present issue, and you have to really kind of combat the exhaustion is what it is. And
Hmm.
I am I've always been a very productive person. I'm a Virgo, so I'm very much like a go-getter. I'm a list maker, but I just realized like I don't have to be productive every second of every day. And so on this last tour with Counterparts, I just really tried to make it a point to just relax. And I don't think I've ever done that on tour, but it's all about finding a balance at the end of the day. And I think that's something I've always struggled with, but
Hmm.
I'm fine in the groove for sure.
You're on
Yeah.
your way to the yin yang, and that makes us happy.
Yes, I'm trying. Thank you.
Yeah. And another thing that I saw that you were doing during the Counterparts tour was some funny content creation. Since this is, a whole podcast about women in the music industry, it would be a disservice if I didn't talk about that video you posted about you reenacted a security guard who was
So good.
questioning your laminate over and over and over again, which in our first episode, I mentioned how that had been happening to me on a tour as well.
Yes.
So I was like, thank you, Emma, for this amazing video. So I would love your 2 cents because you've probably seen it even more than I have. Like, why do you think things like that are still happening with like venue staff, for example? Like, why are we still questioning laminates? And how do we put an end to this chaos?
Well, first of all, I want to give credit to Gabe, our tour manager and our content creator, because originally he's just a guy full of bits. And so I walked back to the green room and he did exactly that. And I was like, nope, we have to film this. We have to put this online. And then immediately afterwards, he was like, oh, yeah, this should be like a full series of content. And I
Yes.
was like, yep.
Oh yeah.
Sadly, that was the last day of tour, but it will be a thing that we do from here on out. Um, I think it's important to laugh about, but I did work in a venue here in Portland, and I think that there's a great example. There's a venue here called the Wonder Ballroom, and it is entirely every different head of the venue is a woman. Security, production, buyers, hospitality, like all of that, all ran by women. And truly, I think that the reason why we're still getting questions like that is lack of female leadership within the industry and also specifically in venues. I think that maybe touring crew is getting to the point where more women are present on in bands on touring crew, but for some reason the culture within venues doesn't really seem to be changing too much, and that's just my personal experience. I'm not saying that for a fact, but I think that we could, as we continue to see a change in leadership with more women within venues, hopefully their influence will be able to slap the men on the side of the head when they say stupid things like, oh, you must be the merch manager or whatever, just making
Yeah.
assumptions about what you do because of your gender.
Yeah. Well, in the meantime, at least you're providing us with some really funny content to make light of this insanity. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think comedy is a really great way to raise awareness for some issues. Obviously you can't joke about everything, but
Right.
But
Good
this we can
reason.
definitely joke about, because the amount of times that even Tori and we've spoken about this on the show before, we've been there to interview or do our thing, and you have the security guard staring at you like, oh, they're just some fan waiting, they're groupies, they're this, they're that. It's like, we literally are here to do a job, and that is the only reason that we are brought to this venue. So I don't need any of your bullshit right now. It happens all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I think my favorite assumption is, so where did the guys find you? It's like, oh, actually I started the band,
Yeah.
but
I
it's just
found
a
the
weird
guys.
assumption. Yes. It's like,
Yes.
oh, she must have, I don't appreciate that. I also don't appreciate the so which one in the band is your boyfriend? Like the only reason I would be here is if I was dating somebody within the band.
Yeah.
And so now I like to say all of them, but
Ooh, spicy answer. I like
I
it.
Yeah.
love that reply.
Yeah. I'll shut them up real quick.
Well, something else that I feel like really shut a lot of people up was when you took to socials on International Women's Day and you really just laid everything out there. You spoke on how women are everywhere in the music industry, yet they will technically not truly be free in heavy music until the correct representation of all people is reflected in the rooms that we share, from venues to everywhere else in between. So I feel like it's such an important message, because we are all equals and should be able to be in the industry that we love, but because of the criticism, it turns a lot of us off and just brushes us away. So one of the biggest things is you really want to carry the ethics of feminism within our scene. So what would you love to see more of in the community that you really think could kind of help improve freedom of women in heavy music?
Well, I think the issue is truly intersectional. I also think that you see a disproportionate amount of white people as well. And so I think, the correct representation of all people, I think it doesn't exactly also just apply to gender, it applies to race
Yeah.
too, because, just as heavy music is sexist, it is also racist. And so I think that the two issues coincide quite a bit, as women feel more comfortable, as trans people feel more comfortable, as people of color feel more comfortable within the scene. That is when we'll truly be free. Um, I truthfully forgot the second half of your question, though, if you would.
No, of course. More so just, how do you feel like we could actually help to improve that and take those strides going forward? Just in terms of people listening, even, is there anything you'd like to tell them?
Mm.
Just, hey, get off your seats and start doing this instead of this.
Well, I think that even a role as attending is super important, but there's so many things that you could do that I don't think that people know about. Like, you could create zines, you could start a blog, you could start a Discord, stuff like that. I also think the responsibility largely falls on bands and promoters and agents and managers to hire and employ people who are not white cis men. And that is kind of the ceiling that we need to break through, as that representation is obvious within the leadership of music. people will start to see that in the crowd, and feel empowered by that, whether it be, they see the LD, the people behind the lighting desk are not men, or, people, stagehands between sets are women, working on stage. And I just think that it really is, it doesn't, that stuff doesn't seem as visible, but it's just as important.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. It's like when you see somebody who looks like you doing the job that you want to have, it's way more encouraging to be like, cool. So if they could do it, I could go out and do it too.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you're definitely walking the walk because, as you had mentioned, in addition to being the wonderful vocalist of Dying Wish, you're also the owner of Brightside Social Club, where you're booking shows in your area, which is so amazing to see. Just that you're also involved in the scene beyond just your own little niche. And when I think about, like, even back when I was a teenager wanting to get into the music industry, it's not like a normal industry where you could just like, oh, I'm just going to pop my resume on this website and I'm just going to apply for the job. It can feel like a little secret club that's really hard to get into. So being someone who's involved in multiple niches and knows the industry quite well at this point, what advice do you have for someone who's like, I want to get involved, I want to get out there and do it?
Well, a lot of it is networking. And sadly, I think that I had to try a lot harder than so like a dude my age would have had to. A lot of it is networking and just, meeting people within the local scene. But also for me, it was just, I saw an opportunity to book a show. So I just did it. And I asked someone who I trusted to show me how to do it, essentially. And
Cool.
it was very like do it yourself. And then from there, I went to working at a venue, and I had originally, this is going to make you guys really mad. Are you ready? This is going to, yeah. So I had applied for this job to be a production manager after booking shows. They didn't give me the job. So I started as a stagehand and I worked my way up. And then when I finally got promoted to production manager, he told me, I didn't think you would be capable of doing it because you're young and you're a woman. And then I still accepted the job for some reason. But um, it was very much like, I'm not saying that we have to prove ourselves, but whatever it is, nobody is going to believe yourself or believe in you if you don't believe in yourself truly. And so it just kind of came with like a frick you attitude, where I was just like, I'm going to do this. And, if you're going to help me, great. If not, you're in my way. So
Mm.
I think the industry is somewhat cutthroat. It's also, I've met some of my favorite people in my entire life through this industry. But it's definitely something you have to fully invest in yourself in order to accomplish. And everyone can do it, and everyone deserves it if they're willing to put in the work as well.
Yeah.
Well, you were right, Emma. That did make us mad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like started
Wow.
sweating as I was telling that story. I'm like,
I
don't
get
blame you.
why. Yeah. That's just sad, genuinely. But again, we've had similar things told to us, and you can either be crushed and shattered in that moment or just straight face it and say, okay, well, I'm here to prove everything that you just said wrong, and you did, which is amazing.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the truth, is like, you got to use that as fuel. Like, okay, well, you say I can't, so let me show you and just go do it. Because I mean, that's
Exactly.
something that comes up time and time again on this podcast, is like the best thing you could do is just be great at what you do and go do it. Like, just rock it.
Right.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like, it's not only do I have to be great at what I do, is I feel like I have to be better at men to really prove myself. You know what I mean? And I have always been a pretty motivated person. Um, but I can see how that would be discouraging to some people. However, to me, it's always been kind of empowering, that I can go out and accomplish those things with the barrier after I've done it, for sure. But it can seem really discouraging at the time, but it actually is empowering when you realize you can do what you thought was impossible.
Yeah. Those are great words. I feel like we need to just quote that. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Of course. Well, now we're going to move into a segment that we do for every single episode of She's with the Band, which is our jaw-dropping segment, where we want to hear about some jaw-dropping moments of your career. So first up, what would you say is the most jaw-dropping experience you've ever had at a show?
Jaw dropping.
Could be a show you've played, or it could be a show you've just attended, just in the audience as well. Either way.
The most recent one that comes up is when we were on tour with Counterparts in Montreal just now. Or not just now, like literally a month ago. But we were something had happened where a security guard had tried to fight someone on stage during their encore. And so they stopped the encore and they like pulled the security guard out, and like, the band was upset, the crowd was upset. And it was like, oh, are they still going to play the encore? And then they started the song from a specific part and just started playing it. But at that point, I'm sure towards that point of the night, everyone was tired, but it just completely revitalized everyone in the crowd. I'm pretty sure it made Brendan very emotional. And they started to do the part, I think it's The Disconnect is the name of the song. They started to do the part, and these people just flooded the crowd. And I got this video where Brendan just puts his arms out and hugs someone in the crowd. And it, like, I have chills thinking about it. And then he just gets swallowed up by like 30 people on stage, and they're all just like hugging each other and screaming the words. And I was just like, wow, that is like, it was emotional. It's an emotional song. It, end of tour, it was an emotional year for everyone, and Counterparts included. And that was just like really hit me in my feels. And I just felt very connected to everyone in the room at that moment.
That's beautiful.
That's such a good example of what we were talking about, how like, even though it can be a very cutthroat industry, you also meet some of the most wonderful people in the most wonderful community you could ever hope for. So it kind of in a way levels out.
I mean,
Exactly.
for those listening, that's literally the reason this interview is happening, because I saw that you guys were on tour together, and I was like, hey, Brendan, you happen to have Emma's contact? And next thing you know, we're here. So
Oh, right. Yes,
Yeah.
I remember
Yes.
that. Shout out Brendan, honestly. He's the best.
He's the best. Shout out Brendan.
Yeah.
And the next one we have here is most jaw-dropping misstep early in your career and the lesson you learned from it.
Ooh, misstep. Well, there was a few of them. I would say I wouldn't necessarily know if I would call it a misstep. But we had gone on tour with Motionless in White. I guess you could call it a misstep. It was more of a misfortune. We hadn't done a tour for like a year and a half. Last thing we did was do a record, and I lost my voice like 4 days into the tour and didn't have it for like a month. And so that was probably the biggest lesson I've learned in my entire career. And one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through, because I'm not only letting myself down, I'm letting the crowd down, and most importantly, I'm letting my guys down in the band. And so it was really difficult. And I had to basically relearn how to do what I thought I was doing. And it was painful. I cried. It was embarrassing, but I ended up coming out better, and, still now I set this goal for myself where I get better every single tour. And I feel like I've been doing that so far within my career. So I'm pretty proud of that. And I'm excited to see where my growth goes next.
So basically you retaught yourself how to scream. Is that what you're saying? Like you had to relearn the like technique for it so that it was safe?
Honestly, we had gotten signed at the beginning of the pandemic. So we had the longest tour we'd ever done was 2.5 weeks long. So I don't know if I just had, I wasn't in the position where my stamina was just keeping me afloat for long enough, but I just really had to relearn how to do it. And I
see.
thought I had known how to do it. It wasn't necessarily painful all the time. It was just like not there. And
Wow.
yeah, so it was tough, but now, I feel much better about it. And I don't think that as a vocalist or as a performer, it's really possible to get better without embarrassing yourself once or twice, or, having a bad tour or a bad performance.
Mm-hmm.
Is it more so a stamina thing when it comes to your style of singing, or is it more so something you actually had to do behind the scenes to get yourself there, just in terms of reteaching yourself? Like, is there something you always do that changed things, or?
I think that a lot of it for me was realizing I had met with Melissa Cross and she taught me a few things that really um, resonated with me, but everyone's voice is different. And I think I was just listening to everybody tell me how my voice worked when I needed to learn truly how my voice worked. And so it just
Okay.
came down to practice and trying different techniques. And I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty, routine, but I struggle with it. And so just like unlearning parts of my performance and, the way that I stood or like a way sang a certain word or something like that. I just had to really unlearn, especially after playing the same set for 5 weeks in a row was not
Right.
hard or not difficult or was difficult. Oh my God, sorry.
Well, now we're going to move on to the next one, which is most jaw-dropping female artists that you would love to work with. Who comes to mind?
Well, right now, um, I feel the utmost adoration for Kat Moss from Scowl. She really inspires me because I don't always feel the most feminine. And I especially haven't always felt really comfortable being feminine um, in my role within the band. But she just is so stunning and she's so iconic. And watching all of her different looks and, watching how she still can seem so fierce while she performs, I'm not in any case gonna jock her style, but it's definitely empowered me like, oh, I could wear a dress and heels on stage if I wanted to. And so she's trailblazing a lot in her own lane, absolutely. And she's also just a good friend and fellow Virgo, and we have conversations about, what we our similar experiences all the time. And I think that you guys would love to chat with her. But Kat is definitely one of the newer ones. And I think Haley Williams has always been one of my biggest influences. She's just so unapologetically, uniquely her. And that's something I've always loved about her.
Oh, I love that you mentioned Kat as well, because I know we're not alone in this, that like you think you're going into heavy music. Oh, I shouldn't wear a dress. I shouldn't wear a skirt. I want to look tough. I want to look, a certain type of way. And it's so empowering to realize like, oh, you can still be both. You can be completely authentic and find your place within the genre. You don't have to wear like cargo pants all the time or big t-shirts. Like it's okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can do it all.
We can do it all and still
Yes,
have the
exactly.
cred that we want. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've had this fear of being sexualized, but then, I see the way that the scene embraces Kat and her style, and I'm like, "Oh, that's not happening at all." I'm just afraid of it happening to me for some reason. Probably because of, the things that we've experienced, but she's really fearless and those looks and the way that she presents herself. I really love it.
Fully. And we have the last one here in this jaw-dropping segment. It's the most jaw-dropping misconception about you that you wish people understood.
Hmm. People think people like say things about me being really dominant or like, oh yeah, she'll kick your ass and stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm actually very sweet. And like, there's that meme of the Chihuahua where it's like the vocalist on stage versus the vocalist at the merch table. That's very me. Um, it's a form of self-expression for me to get up there. And it's like quite a healing process for me to get up there and act with rage. I definitely have a lot of inner rage, but truly I'm a pretty like easygoing, very sweet person. And I think that's what people don't expect when they meet me.
I think that has been proven on today's episode. That is for certain. So anyone who's listening to this, if you still think she's scary, come on. She's
Come
great.
on.
Come on.
Just lovely.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And
Of
thank you so much,
course.
Emma. This has been so awesome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is really, really nice and refreshing.
That makes us so glad. It's one of those things where when this idea was brought to me by Tori, the whole point of this was to really shine a light of the bullshit that we go through, but also how on the other end, you can see a bunch of amazing positives come out of it. And you've just been, quite honestly, the perfect guest to really display that array of everything. So thank you once again for coming on, for hanging out with us today. Of course, to everyone listening, get on Dying Wish already. If you haven't, you are late to the party. And you have been listening to Alicia Atout and Tori Kravitz on She's with the Band. Don't forget to follow us on socials at Tori and Alicia, and feel free to like and subscribe on YouTube and review on all podcast platforms. And for more, notfest.com is your place to be. It really helps us out so much too as we continue to grow and keep shining a light on these fabulous women. So please give us those likes and follows because we love you. And again, everyone, we will see you next week every single Wednesday. But until then, remember, it's pretty cool to be with the band. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.